When I first looked at the Living Values website and saw the values floating in little boxes across the screen, I got more and more excited. Freedom, happiness, honesty, peace, respect, responsibility, cooperation, absolutely. And I hope it's those values that my talk will relate to. So I'm Derry Hannam. I spent 20 years in 3 state secondary schools, creating as much space and time for self-directed learning in democratic and rights-respecting contexts as I could get away with, modelled on my reading about Summerhill School as a student. That's the Suffolk school where the school meeting makes all the important decisions based on one person, one vote, and students can choose which lessons to attend or none at all. There are about 500 of these truly democratic schools around the world, mainly private, but state supported in one or two countries like Israel and the Netherlands. The other key model to Summerhill in influencing me has been Sudbury Valley School in Massachusetts. My book, Another Way is Possible, Becoming a Democratic Teacher in a State School, tells the story of the first of my 3 schools, which was 2 years in a Buckinghamshire secondary modern school, where students were labelled failures at the age of 11. I had a Year 7 class of 34 of these failures, plus a bit of history teaching to older students. The head teacher was concerned to create a smooth transition into Year 7 from primary school, and ignoring the opposition of some heads of department, he introduced integrated humanities with one teacher responsible for English, history, geography, religion, and social studies. He was a bit of a visionary, I think, as his thinking anticipated the recent TES reports of a collapse in engagement and enthusiasm of children through the first terms of Year 7 in English secondary schools nowadays. From day one, we sat in a circle for a class meeting, elected a chair and a secretary democratically. You can do this in any class. Chapter 6 in my book describes the process of creating a democratic classroom in some detail. The idea spread to some of the other parallel classes, leading to a Year 7 council and eventually a school council. I thought I might be fired as I binned much of the prescribed subject curriculum and let the students choose what they wanted to learn about individually or in groups in much of the 50% of curriculum time that I was responsible for, expecting them to share their projects as presentations to the rest of the class. To my surprise, I wasn't fired. I was promoted and put in charge of a team of 7 teachers and all 7 classes of the age group as they moved up to Year 8. We were allocated a suite of adjacent classrooms and timetabled together with dedicated planning time. I'm still in touch with some of those students now approaching retirement. They remember our 2 years together, and 2 have written a chapter in the book. Incidentally, I'll send a free PDF of the final draft to anyone who emails me at derry.hannam245@gmail.com. It's available as an ebook from Smashwords for only $2.45, or more expensively as a paperback from Amazon. The self-directed learning and class democracy were a big hit with the students, and perhaps more crucially their parents, as their kids recovered from the trauma of 11+ failure and began to believe in themselves as learners again. We had what I called my 3 T's for a successful learning environment. We had time, we had a team, nobody was on their own, and we had territory, time, team, and territory, our own dedicated space. After 2 years, I moved on to a large 2,000 student school as head of humanities, and then to a Derbyshire community school as vice principal, taking these self-directing, democratic and rights-respecting ideas with me. Eventually, I became an inspector, probably a mistake, though coming in full circle, it enabled me to work as an advisor to the legal team defending Summerhill School when Ofsted tried to close it in 1999. We won the following court case, and the school is still thriving 25 years later. For me, this was a wonderful opportunity, as Summerhill was the school that inspired me to become a teacher in the first place. In order to find and deepen their interests and identity, and to learn how to live with others, young people need time. Time to think, to wonder, to question, to create, to make and learn with friends, to find out who they are, and a space to do it in. Yet these are the very things that prior to COVID, most state secondary schools in England deprived them of. Lunchtimes, playtimes were cut. The encroachment into their free time was not just during the school day, but also at home with relentless homework and examination revision. Even during COVID lockdown, many schools set conventional schoolwork online from the screen instead of from the whiteboard, followed by conventional tests. Some parents were expecting this, but a growing number were not. Young people missed their friends during lockdown, but many did not miss lessons where they had no choice, no control or agency, and no consent in their learning. Some parents struggled to present this prescribed curriculum to their kids at home. Research into Canadian parents' attitudes to school curriculum since COVID lockdown shows that 73% thought that much more attention should be given to the interests of the students when the schools reopened. Similarly, Danish parents found that since the exams and mandatory learning goals have been abandoned for the time being, teachers report feeling more playful with students. They're working with co-creation and involving the students in making decisions more than before. There is quality time spent between teachers and students, resulting in better relationships and increased student well-being. In Denmark, the emphasis switched from teaching to learning, from prescribed content to inquiry, and freed from the pressure of examination preparation, a change in the quality of student-teacher relations to include more student participation and creativity. Well, what an opportunity to do things differently when schools reopened in England. But sadly, it hasn't happened, has it? We're too busy catching up with lost curriculum, much of which is boring and meaningless to many young people. Perhaps it's not surprising that Denmark has the happiest young people in Europe, and we in England have the unhappiest. Self-determination theory posits an association between mental health and well-being and the student agency and autonomy provided by participation in making decisions about their own learning and in belonging to a community of learners as their competencies develop. Time and space for self-directed and self-exploring learning around the interests, concerns, questions, enthusiasms, passions, talents, and purposes of the young people. Jerome Bruner spoke of the 3 C's of childhood, that children are naturally curious, collaborative, and need to feel competent, adding with the late Ken Robinson that they're naturally creative. We need a school system where academic attainment and exam results are not prioritised over all else, creating the pressure, anxiety, loss of well-being and threat to mental health evident in England, in students, in young people, and, I have to say, in their teachers. It's tragic that we plan for the failure of a third of our young people at GCSE after 11 years of telling them that the purpose of life is high grades, all in the name of preserving standards, or more tacitly, providing a supply chain for the Russell Group universities. Are the young people or their parents told that this is how the English zero-sum exam system works? That if one school gets above average exam results, another school will inevitably be pushed below average? That the proportions of pass and fail grades are fixed beforehand? I'm pleased that having done so much harm with his PISA academic international league tables, Andreas Schleicher of the OECD is now saying that individual and community well-being should have equal status with academic learning as the purpose of schooling. That might begin to address the current education policy crisis of teacher retention and students' attendance, or lack of it, and disengagement. A Facebook group that supports teachers wanting to leave teaching has 175,000 followers, and large numbers of young people are absent from full-time schooling post-COVID. Yet the work of psychology academic Peter Gray demonstrates that you can have your cake and eat it. If the priority of schooling, as in Finland, for example, is shifted towards well-being and the creation of positive school climate, academic learning actually improves. My own research for David Blunkett, which became known as the Hannam Report in 2001, when he was Education Minister introducing citizenship during the first Blair government, my research showed that schools which included their students in decision making, but were more than usually participative, and in many aspects of school life, these schools actually gained better GCSE results, had better attendance, and fewer exclusions for antisocial behaviour than the average for all schools in similar socioeconomic environments. I can send anyone a copy of that report if they'd like it. Some English secondary schools have activities week at the end of the summer term when examinations are finished, a wide variety of off-curriculum activities involving students, parents and community groups, often offered to mixed age groups. The variety and enthusiasm generated can be impressive. School and community can turn on to each other. Students previously disengaged from school can change their attitudes both to school and to themselves as learners as new opportunities for choice and engagement emerge. In the rural school where I was community vice principal, a community newspaper edited by adults and students emerged, which 30 years later I've just received the 200th edition. A community orchestra began with some 80 players, aged to 80, and it's still there. A recent large US study showed that what distinguishes kids from poverty backgrounds who go on to lead successful lives from those who end up in the criminal justice system is that they were good at something at school. It didn't matter what it was, as long as it was something that had engaged them. There are rural schools in the UK where many students can't take part in extracurricular activities because of long bus journeys home, where programmes of electives move extracurricular into the regular school timetable for one afternoon per week. In one school that I inspected, close to a famous motor racing circuit, with the assistance of some parents, a mixed age and gender group actually built a working racing car as an elective project and drove it round the school field. It was quite something. Reduced conventional teaching time enabled the electives programme to have a budget to hire mentors if needed. One parent told me that our children would get off their deathbeds to get to school on electives day. The school had very few exclusions, high levels of attendance, especially on electives afternoon, and better than expected GCSE results. Well, the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Programme, Personal Project, the Extended Project Qualification, EPQ at A level, the Personal Project component of Rosina Dorelli's biophilic curriculum, the EdXL Project Qualifications, the new PEPA Primary Extended Project Award, the International Network of Catalyst Learning Lab Schools. All these offer self-directed opportunities for those students who are fortunate enough to attend the minority of schools where they're available. No one questions their power of engagement or that the time allocated to them undermines standards in the rest of the curriculum. As Kate Longworth of Gaia Learning, which creates personalised curriculum for neurodiverse students, puts it, the simple idea is that when learners engaged with what they are passionate about, motivation and focus increase, leading to more success and, of course, enhanced well-being. It's lovely to listen to the enthusiasm of the pupils at Primary School 360 in London, explaining how much they look forward to choose our own learning, or COOL, COOL, time, or the students in the YouTube film of Suvamai School Within a School, part of the mainstream conventional arts gymnasium in Tallinn in Estonia, which has a democratic school within a school where students choose 20% of curriculum time around their own interests. In the US, a recent study showed that depression and burnout in medical students massively reduced from 54% to 4% when 20% of their time was set aside to follow up their own interests, free from heavily prescribed study and intern pressures. In Germany, there are now more than 300 state secondary schools in the Schule im Aufbruch program, led by Berlin head teacher Margret Rasfeld, where Fridays are indeed Freitags, giving students the opportunity to devise studies of their own choice around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. 1 day per week, in fact. So, my 20% proposal, modest proposal, forgive me, Dean Swift, my 20% modest proposal has recently been described by some French academics as a no-brainer. I wish that was the reaction I got in England. So my proposal is that all schools should allocate 20% of curriculum time for the questions, concerns, enthusiasms, interests, purposes, passions, talents of the students. Time for individual or collaborative self-directed learning. In schools where the learning has been very largely adult-directed, self-directed 20% time would need to be introduced with careful preparation to ensure that vision and implementation were aligned. Students could be organised into small tutorial groups for support and monitoring, as practiced at the Self-Managed Learning College in Brighton, or CREW, as practiced at the XP schools in Doncaster. Teacher numbers could be augmented by parent or community mentors to provide support in case of floundering, paralysis, or panic in those possibly neurodiverse students who might suffer anxiety and uncertainty at the new responsibilities. These students frequently fail to thrive in existing mainstream school environments anyway. Excuse me. But they would need extra care as the 20% time was introduced. Flourishing, thriving, and agency, not coercion, would be the key drivers. The introduction of 20% time would fit nicely into schools that are developing digital learner profiles, along with some cross-curricular teacher-led project-based learning, perhaps using the new Skills Builder Universal Framework 2.0. Some students might choose to use their 20% time to extend and deepen their learning in a mainstream subject, though parental pressure to direct this would need to be monitored and challenged. Staff could also use this time to pursue their own research questions and interests, thereby modelling lifelong learning. Students could become facilitators for other students. A science teacher recently wrote about how much more some students knew about climate change than she did. The organisational process would itself be educational. The motivation and morale of adults and students would rise. The new engagement which will result will more than compensate for any loss of learning from reduction in formal subject teacher time. In fact, standards will rise. Attendance and results will improve, as will teacher retention. Exclusions will decline. Students will learn how to take responsibility for at least part of their own learning and learn how to manage at least part of their own time, both crucial if they're to deal with the opportunities and uncertainties that the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence and climate change are presenting us. Students will learn how to discover their own genius and create their own identities, not just defined by test scores. If paid employment declines in the future with artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution and universal basic income, young people will learn how to be unique, creative, socially responsible individuals, not reliant on full-time paid employment for their identity. We are going to see, I fear, a serious decline in full-time paid employment. They will have learned the entrepreneurial skills necessary to launch their own economic or social enterprises. 20% time could become an incubator for student-initiated small businesses or charities supported by mentors from the local community, thus helping staff the small 20% time tutor groups to provide more adults to have smaller groups. Schools could create a 20% committee of staff, mentors, and students to plan how the programme would be organised. Thus, students would participate in serious school decision making, avoiding the tokenism of too many school councils. A 20% or passion department could be created, led by a teacher of deputy head status and staffed by teachers from all subjects enthusiastic to work in this way, thereby creating a team of experienced self-directed learning facilitators with the new skills that this will require. The department could have its own part of the school buildings, the 20% wing or school within a school, where presentations of student projects and initiatives could be held. An entirely new approach to assessment would be required, based on processes as much as finished products. Failure would be something to be learned from and not something to be feared. The EDGE Foundation and Rethinking Assessment have much to offer here. The 20% department could introduce digital pupil profiling. 20% of the students of mixed ages could be in the 20% wing at any one time. Or already, I'm happy to say, there are teachers quietly introducing 20% time into their own classes, such as pondering time. I love that. The Hampshire Religious Education agreed syllabus now includes pondering time, which is essentially 20%, the 20% idea with a nicer name. It's being pioneered by the RE department in a large Isle of Wight school. Universities could develop 20% laboratory schools in programmes such as the EU Erasmus Plus funded Lab Schools Europe programme or the NEEDS network in Ireland. Every school should be free to organise the use of this 20% time in its own way. It could be half a day per week plus 20% of some lessons, or 2 half days, or 1 day per week, or 20% of all lessons. If as students become more motivated, the compulsory directed curriculum could be managed in a reducing amount of time, then the 20% could expand. The 20% proposal is already happening in the United States, especially in California, in the 20-time movement. I just show this, a book by Kevin Brookhauser on how the 20% project works in California. His book is called The 20-Time Project, How Educators Can Launch Google's Formula for Future-Ready Innovation. Recently, the Economist Intelligence Unit produced a report called Staff 2030, The Future of Teacher Training. It recommends 20% of curriculum time for students-directed learning. It judged that the competencies developed are precisely those needed for the future workplace of the fourth industrial revolution, and that our current school systems are singularly not producing, namely self-directed, autonomous learners and creators. The 20% idea has recently surfaced in the newsletter of the UK Local Government Association. Not my favourite bedtime reading, but I was delighted to read this article recommending the 20% idea. Significantly, the evolved nature of human childhood, described by Bruner and Gray, of playful, creative, autonomous, yet collaborative creatures, now aligns with the needs of enlightened employers. Yet few schools or school systems have made the connection. We need innovation or moonshot time, where students are free to come up with their own ideas of what they want to do and study and how they want to do it. Your students will be future ready if you just give them time, says Esther Vajitsky of Palo Alto High School in Silicon Valley. She was a member of the Economist Teacher Training Report writers. Time, says Esther Vajitsky, time is perhaps the greatest gift we can give young people. Her students use 20% of their class time for totally self-directed projects, where their natural learning instinct takes flight individually or in collaboration with others. We really must stop filling every moment at school and at home with prescribed curriculum. Google has introduced a 20% project where employees can follow their own ideas beyond their job descriptions for 20% of their paid work time. And this at Google has led to profitable innovations such as Gmail and AdSense, both developed by one of Esther Vajitsky's daughters, Susan, until her recent death, sadly. She was CEO at YouTube. All around the world, we're seeing campaigns for change coming from young people themselves. In the UK, Teach the Future argues for more relevant climate change curriculum. There would be students in many schools who would almost certainly use their 20% time for this purpose. Could it be that at last, the natural learning potential of young people will align with the emerging social and economic need for collaborative and creative innovators? Could schools become places that nurture the social and economic entrepreneurs that our future needs? Nurturing hearts and educating minds, says your organisation. That puts it beautifully. Several organisations, such as Human Scale Education, are backing the 20% idea in their submissions to the current curriculum and assessment review, though sadly the review's interim report makes no mention of it. The proposal is surfacing in mainstream media around the world. In a guest essay in the New York Times on the 2nd of January this year, entitled Giving Kids Some Autonomy Has Surprising Results, Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop from the Brookings Institute, authors of the book The Disengaged Teen, having reviewed 35 studies from 18 countries, write, when students have some autonomy and control, they become more engaged, better able to master new skills, gain higher grades, have fewer problems with their peers, and they are happier. So, as I said to an audience of 150 newly qualified teachers at a conference last week, wherever and whenever you have responsibility for a group of young people, create a democratic decision-sharing meeting and begin to create opportunities for self-directed learning, say 20%, or whatever time you have together. At the same time, look for colleagues who share your values for mutual support. And of course, choose your first school with great care. Take a good look at it. Talk to lots of kids. Make sure that what you see and hear actually matches up to the claims of the school mission statement. My last word to those students was, I have to advise you in the current climate, join a union and join the Chartered College of Teachers. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. That's it. You'll be glad to hear. I look forward to any questions anybody has.